Hello, again we meet you to present this series of interviews with the poets who came from different European countries in order of attending the Poetry Week, which has held by the Runoviiko and the Kirjantalo in Turku. Klaus Ankersen is our guest this time, who came from the Danish capital Copenhagen to the first capital in Finland and the capital of European culture, Turku, in bid to travel through his poems, hearts of audience. Let's welcome him together. Welcome to Turku.
Thank you.
Is this your first time you have visited the city?
No, I have actually been here. I think this must be my third time. I think in Runoviiko, and so yeah, it's with great pleasure that I come back to the city. I really love it here.
What's the first impression you have taken about Finland?
When I arrived in Helsinki for the first time, this was before the Runoviiko. I was invited to another festival in Pispala, and at that time, when I landed in Helsinki, I was struck by the fact that there were no graffiti at all on the walls. That struck me as very weird. But yeah, it was kind of strange that the city was kind of completely clean of graffiti. That was my first, that it was very orderly and very organized and very civilized. And then another thing I discovered was that there is room for quirkiness here. You can wear a pot on your head as a hat and nobody will look at you strangely. This is a very nice thing in Finland that I don't find in so many other countries, especially not the Nordic countries that are very dominated by the same Protestant ethics, but sort of a different version of it.
Would you tell us about your beginnings in poetry?
I started writing poetry when I was a teenager. I wrote my first poems when I was basically 15, just starting in high school, 15, 16. That collection was never published, but it's in my dad's house, and I still have that collection. It's very depressed poetry, typical teenage poetry. But also back then I did political stuff, like I do today, and that was the beginning. Then when I was 23, I started, in my early 20s, I started writing short stories, and I had this collection accepted from a Danish publisher. And basically I went to the Middle East to write for a year or two, until the publisher decided not to publish that collection out of the blue. And that led me to, I was very disappointed about that, of course, so that led me to forget all about my writing, put it in the dresser, and just think, fuck it, I'm gonna be an academic anyway. So I enrolled in university and started that path. And only after that, I took fiction writing and poetry writing up again and started writing. So I've been doing it for the past 15 years as a full-time writer. And that's where we are today.
What about your projects of poetry?
I think it mainly centers around, well, there are certain red threads in the poetry that I do. There is a political dimension, a political systems critic dimension of it. There is, of course, the whole emotive dimension, like the love poetry, and there is an esoteric or occult kind of side to it. So I do also these poems, partially political, partially about love, revolution, and transcendence, basically. Yeah, that's three topics that you will see basically running through my work, I guess, pretty much as a red thread. Also, I do a lot of travelogue poetry. Like I do a lot of writing in different places. I like to write when I'm on the go, like here in Turku or in Tallinn, or it could be in New Delhi or on Manhattan, wherever I am. I like to write there about the places also, and about what they kind of tell me. So I have that also, a lot of poetry about that from different places.
Rant poetry, list poetry, not unlike this poetry. Autofictional tribute and stichomantic poetry, esoteric, political poetry, revenge poetry, revolutionary, rebellious and cooking poetry, yoga poetry, pogo poetry, MILF, emergency hilf and thrill poetry, found poetry, cut up poetry, stolen, inspired and defeat poetry, stand up for humanity and fight, clop poetry. Flower poetry, power poetry, it's all up to you, poetry, being you, poetry, being poetry, my poetry, your poetry, just poetry.
My pores as first light, rushing to be caught from the flow, transfixed and transformed, kept and cultured, masked to belong, named to resonate better, echoing back towards the great unknown of a reader's heart. Out there, somewhere, somehow, suddenly, my poetry is the dream I dream every night only to awake into a long poem of daylight, human misery carved in flesh and bouncing off black silicium.
Of course, you're all gonna come and party with us and have a lot more poetry, right? Yeah, Tilla Beauty! Tomorrow night. This one is kind of like down the same aisle, basically. It's from this beautiful anthology that was just published in England during the London Literature Festival. We were a bunch of wackos and crazy people and
Waiting screens, chasing forever, the now we can almost remember. The now we can almost remember, friends, but never grasp that the set transition came. Redemption was here, an absolute now, while we were all busy looking the other way. Waiting screens, chasing forever, the now we can almost remember. The now we can almost remember, friends, but never grasp that the set transition came. Redemption was here, an absolute now, while we were all busy looking the other way.
To what extent the experiment of traveling can help poets to discover new worlds or new horizons?
I think, well, I like it so much. So of course I have to recommend it to everybody, especially fellow poets, that, you know, if you're not traveling yet as a poet, I think you should. Because even though, I mean, there are different ways. You can travel the world while sitting in this chair, not moving at all. You can do this, but you can also actually leave the chair and travel. And I think it's such a gift, you know, to be able to explore the world from different positions. Is a great gift, and I think it adds greatly to the empathy, basically, of the poet, and to your sensibility. It adds to your sensibility, and this sensibility you need to be able to filter the world through you in the best possible way, and make that link between from the universal through the idiosyncratic filter of your own cognitive system, and back into a poetry that's hopefully, on a good day, relevant to other people too, because it resonates with the common consciousness that we all share. Again, so this journey, to do that, you need to be a sensitive person, you know, and I think travel is very good for that.
Have you got a poetic specialty, or have you got any of your dreams?
Oh, you mean if I am there where I imagine that would be? Oh, what? No, not at all. I mean, I think no. I mean, I always wanted to. I wanted to be a writer from when I was 15, but I didn't. No, I had no way. I imagined it would be like this. I had no idea. I imagined so many other things, but not this. But I think I'm very happy about my international dimension of my authorship, and the friendships and the networks that I formed with poets around the world. It means a lot to me, and I plan to work on that in the coming years to strengthen that further and strengthen that dimension. Do more travel, more international work, and more collaborative projects with other poets.
How many countries have you visited?
As a poet,
as a poet?
As a poet, I think 18.
18 countries.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the most places have inspired you to write.
I think, well, the funny thing is that each time as a poet that I visit a new country, I sort of feel that I become one of them. So now I'm also a Finnish person, and I'm an Estonian person, and I'm an Armenian person, and I'm all these places I've been. I can kind of like put that flag in my head, and identify with that. And there's a lot of countries still left, you know. But the thing is, I'm often invited back. Like here in Finland, is it maybe the fourth time, and so you know, it's a challenge to keep adding new countries when you have to coming back to the old countries, of course, to strengthen the connections you have there and present new stuff to the audience there and the readership. But I like to give something back to that place that's been good to me. So I'm planning on publishing a collection here in Finland. Hopefully it'll be next year. Kalle Ninlinkangas will translate, most probably, and it will be, I hope, published here in 2016, 17. I have a collection coming out in Ukraine. It's already translated, because I was also invited there 3-4 times, and I like that also. So Romania is coming out a project now in spring. 2 times I've been there. And yeah, Australia actually, but I haven't been there yet. But hopefully the collection will allow me to go.
Let's know, are you trusting with learning different languages?
Yes. Oh, I wish that I could speak, you know, all the languages of humanity.
How many of them do you know?
Perfect. At mother tongue level, only English and Danish. I wish I could write in other languages also, because I think it allows you to get in contact with a different sphere of yourself. And if you could just speak 8, 10, 6 languages maybe, I think you could have a much bigger command of your instrument, of yourself as an instrument in your poetic works, you know, than if you could just communicate with one language. But it's not going to be in this life, I don't think so, because time is short, and you know.
Have you ever tried to learn Finnish?
No, I have never. I'm very fascinated by its, you know, its whole, the somberness of it, and it's beautiful. But I haven't tried to learn to speak Finnish. Not that I could easy. No, I haven't.
What words do you know in Finnish language?
Sauna, ullut. Language, I think especially the suffix, actually, the lainen, like turkulainen, suomilainen, bibliotekalainen, you know, interviewlainen. I don't know so many words, but I like it. I think every language, I can't think of any language that's not extremely beautiful when you read poetry in it. Even languages like German that can be like a little bit square and weird. When you read poetry in Germany, it's beautiful. In Swedish, you read poetry beautiful. In Arabic, in Finnish, in every language, you know. Udmurt, it's beautiful. Russian is beautiful. Danish is beautiful.
How does the Finnish language in poetry sound to you?
I think it's very Finnish. The Finnish voice to me is it's a little bit folkloristic. And it's more so folkloristic than it is in Denmark. In Estonia, it's even more folkloristic. But here in Finland, it's like a mixture. You have this shamanic kind of tone that's like in all the poetry here, that you don't find in when you go south in the Nordic countries or further down in Europe. It's very distinct. Basically, maybe I don't know if you can say that the poetry will somehow be shaped by the geography or the biotope of the country, but this big wilderness here in Finland with the woodlands and stuff, you can feel it in the poetry. It's in the people, it's in their hearts, and it's also in their words. This big, strong, crazy nature that they have here, you know, it's in them. It's very nice, what I like about them. Well, basically, language is so many things, right? It's an instrument of communication, of love and emotion and transcendence and everything. And I think every language like that is beautiful. Every language has its song and its own and its own kind of particular resonance with the human organism, basically. So every language will have its magic, a magic of its own.
Between English and Danish, where do you find yourself as a writer?
I think it's different. It's different sides of me, simply different layers of myself that I'm in contact with when I write in the different languages. I think I've been doing a lot of English stuff, but of course I did also a lot of Danish stuff. I don't know. I think as soon as I leave my country, it's English for sure. I mean, I wouldn't sit here and make a Danish poem. I could do it, but I wouldn't do it. I would naturally, it would be in English.
What is the definition of poetry, in your opinion?
That's a good question. It's a very good question. It's a big question. Well, if you ask me what poetry can do as a genre, as a literary genre, I think what poetry can do is that poetry can capture the moment. Poetry can capture the now as one of the few, and kind of dissect the now and fold it out like a flower. That's what poetry can do. Poetry can, yeah, you can dive into the now via poetry or with poetry. Yeah.
Do you translate from English into Danish?
Some of the stuff that I write, I choose to translate also, and some of the pieces will just be untranslated and only be in one of the languages. But I translate back and forth between them also, of my own pieces, and occasionally also work on other people's stuff, but mainly my own, actually.
What do you try to address by poetry?
I try to address, well, basically political injustice or arrogance, the faults of our current way of writing the world into existence or dreaming the world into existence. Well, basically, I think I'm trying to dissect the things that I'm trying to look see behind the lines or beneath the facade. I'm trying to basically find out what it's about, what being is about, and I think it entails everything.
Through your own lens, how do you interpret the crisis of refugees, of what they have called it as a crisis?
Well, basically, I think that first of all, it's horrible for the people that are fleeing. And second of all, I think that there are refugees all over the world right now, on almost all the continents, and there is a lot of refugees that we never even hear about in the media. There's a lot of refugees that are never mentioned, and if you ask me about the particular stream of refugees that are coming into Europe right now, I would say that it's orchestrated, and it's orchestrated on a completely different level than I'm not talking about how people talk to each other and in their desperation and want for a better life and say, where should we go, what should we do? Well, the Smith family went that way, maybe we should also go that way, That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that it's orchestrated on a completely different level. There has been people doing calculations about what would happen if you would destabilize that regime in Syria and Iraq, and they've been calculating, I promise you, to the 200th decimal, what would be the possible consequences of this and this happening and what would happen then. So I think it's orchestrated and it's for a purpose, and it's got nothing to do with, regrettably, the individual suffering of all these families and horrible psychological trauma that it is, for families to fucking run away from everything and try to, say goodbye basically to where you're from and start again from scratch somewhere else where you don't know anything about what's going on there and don't know the people or anything.
Is it a new crisis in history of humanity?
I think no, creating refugees and people fleeing from bad things,
Yes.
trying to get a better life is probably something we always had, regrettably. But I think this crisis is for a purpose, whether it's to destabilize Europe or make or change the demographics of the European population so that it becomes younger. I don't know what it's for, but I think there is a purpose, and it's got nothing to do with the well-being of you or I.
I mean, it's not the first time that a human
No.
had to travel, that he have traveled before, that from the beginning of the humanity that we were in our African homes, that we quit, we abandoned our African homes by because of the nature, but now because of a human we abandoned our land, and then we traveled and when we deployed in all over the world. So it's not new for our world that human has to travel because it's life. How do you comment on that?
Yes and no, I would say, because I think it's a very dangerous logic. On the other hand, because yes, of course, it's true that people have there's always been refugees for one reason or another throughout the mankind's history, or history as we know of. On the other hand, that's a little bit like saying, oh, but we are greedy and we are competitive and we are selfish, while you forget the other side of the story. I mean, why do you have to have refugees? The answer is you don't really. We didn't sign a contract that we would make a globe where people had to flee from shit all the time. No, we could maybe make it better and make it unnecessary for people to do that. And speaking of these psychological traits that we have, why are we not telling ourselves the full story? Why do we allow for traits like greed, aggressiveness, competitiveness to tell ourselves these are dominant traits in humanity? No, they're not. What about self-sacrifice? What about kindness? What about generosity? What about love? These are the fucking dominant traits in us, not the other ones. These are the crocodile traits, the reptile traits. And that's the whole thing about that plan. You can call me paranoid, but the thing is, what you see today is like alligator capitalism on the bottom. This is what they wanted to believe, that this is the only way it can be. Yeah, you have to bite your fellow neighbor, to get ahead, and it's competitive and all that. While on the top, they have gift economy already. If you're like a multinational bank and you're like, oh yeah, well, I kind of lost $3 fantasillion million trillion dollars, then your friends are gonna say, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll just put a big fat fucking clink through it. Forget about it. What money? And it's gone, That's the top. The bottom, they want to have us like a pool of alligators biting each other's tails and shit. But it's not true. We're not like that. We're love organisms, interdimensional light beings. We're not alligators. Or we can choose, at least, if we want to be worms or angels, I think we should choose the angel instead of the worm.
Are you married?
No, married. I'm not married.
You don't plan to create family?
If I meet a nice girl, maybe, if it'll happen, That'd be nice. I'm not opposed to it, I'm not opposed to having children as well. I would love to have children. If I could have children myself, I would have had many now. But you need, it never happened. But not for, on purpose.
So you are looking for?
Yeah, I'm always looking. Poets fall in love all the time, don't you know that? All the time. In ideas, in people, in places. Poets I fall in love all the time, basically, all the time.
They say a poet is like a bird, goes from branch to branch or from flower to flower.
That's funny, because I heard that one of my Indian friends, and he's a playwright and a poet and an actor also, and he said exactly the same to me. He's like, yeah, people like us, yeah, we need to. He said exactly the same as you're saying now. So maybe it's true that we need change, and yeah, that we're like birds. Maybe it could be true. I mean, I know I did my share of flying from flower to flower, so yeah.
For how long you will stay looking for this?
How long I will keep looking? Always, I think.
Always.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself that you are obligated to catch a family as soon as possible?
No, I don't, because I lost both of my parents, so that pressure is not there anymore. You know, if there was a pressure, to the extent that there was a pressure, not that it was a big pressure or anything, but now it's just from me, and I think maybe that's also part of the journey, and maybe it's just, maybe you have many soulmates. Maybe you just don't just have one soulmate. Maybe you have many, and maybe we can also negotiate different structures of family and different structures of relationship and stuff. And so maybe I think we're also being very hard on ourselves, because we are using our own lives to fulfill some memes or some poems that are or frames that are told us about, like romantic love, for instance. This is a big thing in the West, right? And we're all kind of programmed with the longing for that, and it's an illusion, like so many other things. It's all in your mind. It's a construct, the perfect love, the one and only. It's like, yeah, it's not like that.
What does loneliness mean to you?
Well, loneliness is, I think, as a writer or as an artist working with like individual expressions, when you're not like a filmmaker or anything, but it's every poet's friend. It walks next to you. Because you need to, in order to do this job, you need to be comfortable in your own company. You need to be okay with just being you, alone. And you can be alone without being lonely, but sometimes, of course, also you get lonely when you're alone or when you're with people. Like traveling, for instance, can be a little bit lonely, especially if it's unknown territory. I feel it can be more lonely. Like if I go to a civilization or a region I haven't been to before, then it's because you're more vulnerable, and also I can feel a little bit more lonely. But usually I don't feel lonely when I'm alone, not at all. I'm fine with being alone.
Thank you for joining us. Now would like to hear your last words.
Famous last words. Well, forward towards the infinite universe.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I thank you as well for watching. Hope to meet you again. This is Ahmed Zadani greeting you again from city of Turku in Finland. Goodbye.